This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, who invites you to give the gift of great beer this holiday season. A gift membership is the perfect way to bring friends and family into the homebrewing hobby. And what's more, you can choose a free book with your gift card purchase. Visit homebrewersassociation.org for details and make sure to place your order by December 15th to ensure you receive your free book in time for the holidays. homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, November 18th, 2021. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Michael Conger and Scoggins from the U.S. Open Beer Championship and other competitions talk about how the U.S. Open got started, how it's going, and how it's expanded to other categories of fermented beverages as well. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our brewers' logbooks. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. And this month, probably by the end of this week, I'm going to post a special bonus video, a food video, made with home-fermented sauerkraut that I made myself here at the house. I've been getting disaster stories in for our annual disaster show, which Steve and I will be recording before you know it. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we're taking the week off, and I won't be able to remind you then. So if you've had a brewing experience over the past year that's worth a chuckle or a cringe maybe, and you want to share it, send it to james@basicbrewing.com. I kegged my rosemary. I'm a little groggy today because the dog got sprayed by a skunk in the wee hours of the morning. So I'm trying not to inhale, and I'm a little sleepy. but my coffee is waiting for me in the other room. I kegged and the recipe that we found online, the hydrogen peroxide, the baking soda, and the dish soap may work on the dog, but not on the various surfaces that she rolled on and vomited on and stuff. That's a disaster story for you right there. It's not brewing related, but there you go. I kegged my rosemary Munich beer the other day that I brewed with a resurrected 8-month-old pouch of Imperial Que Bueno. It's good, but not what I was expecting. I was expecting like a spruce-like character, and I do get a little of that, but I'm having an issue with putting my finger on exactly what I'm tasting in there. I need to get Steve Wilkes' input on what's going on there. Steve posted the other day that he bottled his giant sizer, giant as in gravity and alcohol content. I'm looking forward to tasting that. Steve said he was planning on making Applejack with it, freezing the sizer and then concentrating the alcohol in that way, but he says it's just too delicious as it is to mess with it. So look for those two beverages on a future video episode. Susan also helped me bottle the next sampler experiment. This one puts US-05 against active dry and rapid rise bread yeasts. And I tasted the beers when we bottled them, and I think, I say this often, but I think I have a good shot at telling these apart and telling which is which. No spoilers, though. Let's take a quick look into the mailbag. Dan Schreffler from Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, who you heard in the show a few weeks ago, wrote about his lavender mead that Steve and I tasted on that show. Dan says the lavender mead took silver at the Mazer Cup and got a double gold and best of class at the 2021 American Wine Society competition. Wow! Congratulations, Dan. That was certainly delicious, and I think that I said that was my favorite of the flight. Speaking of Space-Time Mead and Cider Works, you may remember that it was Nick Tier was the one who sent the yeast into space that one of those meads we tasted was made with. And Nick wrote in after hearing us talk on the interview. Nick says, I just listened to the latest episode. I got this letter a couple weeks ago. And he says, that was great. Dan sent me some of the mead, and it is fantastic. Oh, and just to clarify, everything was on the up and up for the mission. We cleared it all and even sent beer to the mission commander. Glad to be part of another episode. So I guess you could say it was on the up and away. Thanks to Nick for being part of the show, and thanks to Dan from Spacetime again for sharing those delicious meads. Speaking of delicious things, it's been a while since I've talked about the delicious beer ingredient kits from our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave from HighGravityBrew.com. I looked on their homepage and saw Old St. Nick Ale is being offered. Now, this is a beer kit inspired by Avery's Old Jubilation Ale with mocha and toffee and a hint of hazelnut in the flavors. Sounds like a perfect thing to brew now to get ready for the holidays. And while you're on HighGravityBrew.com, be sure to check out the Build Your Own Beer page if you've got a seasonal recipe of your own to put together and are looking for an easy way to get ingredients. And you can bookmark a page for Santa with the Wordhog electric brewing system tailored to your needs and desires. Be sure to tell Santa to use the promo code EBC75BB to save $75 off your Wordhog purchase. You know, Steve and I love our Wordhog systems. They sure take the pain out of propane. And they bring the cheers into holiday cheer. Check it all out at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, let's talk to Dow Scoggins and Michael Conger from the U.S. Open Beer and Other Beverages Competition. Michael Conger, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hi, James. Great to be here.
And Dow Scoggins, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Sir James, it's an honor.
You don't know me very well. We'll see if you say that in half an hour or so.
I didn't realize you invited, but yeah.
Well, you guys, I got an email from Michael, saying, talking about all the stuff that you're involved in, and saying, hey, would you like to talk to us for your show? And I said, well, yes, I would. It's you guys are all up in the beer stuff, and we've got a lot to talk about. And my feeble mind here this evening, I'm trying to structure everything into a way that, kind of flows and seems like I'm doing this on purpose. So maybe you guys can help in that way.
Good luck.
So we're here to talk mostly, I'm assuming, about the U.S. Open beer competition. But, Michael, you've got other stuff going on in the beer world as well.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm an avid listener of Basic Brewing Radio and a practicing home brewer. So I've enjoyed your show for a long time, and I'm sure everybody who comes on the show would want to say this, but it's a huge pleasure for me to be here.
Give me a minute. We'll see what you say in half an hour.
I'll try. So I also, in addition to working with Dow on the U.S. Open, along with lots of other great folks, I do some research in the beer industry. I'm an entrepreneurship professor at Miami University, aka Miami of Ohio. So the cold Miami, not the nice Miami, but. And so I do some research as part of my work there on the beer industry. And I also take a bunch of students on an annual brewing industry field study tour. So this year, January 3rd, we are able to travel again this year, thankfully. And we'll be going to the Colorado Front Range, the Tampa, Florida area, and to Asheville, North Carolina, and touring about 50 different companies. So lots of breweries, but also equipment manufacturers, yeast labs, hop farms. There's not a lot going on at hop farms in January, but distributors. We go to the Brewers Association just to really immerse ourselves in the industry and kind of see what we can learn. And sometimes our students even choose that as a career. So wow. It's pretty fun.
Wow. I'd say. Yeah, that's wonderful. It sounds like, and I bet and they say there's nothing like experience to be a good teacher, and seeing all of that industry up close and personal has got to be very useful for the students.
Oh yeah, and I always learn something, right? So I told my students as we're getting ready for this trip, I said there'll be some things that I can predict, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about why or why not people like making seltzers or don't like making seltzers. That I can predict, but there'll be a big thing that comes up that I can't predict, but that'll be really interesting. So 2 years ago, if you think about the timing of this, I thought my students asked me things about, I'm a business professor, right? So what about, these companies, big breweries buying small breweries, things like that. We talked about it. And they said, well, can you think of any brewery that would be a target for acquisition, but probably wouldn't do it? At that time, I said, probably the one I could think would be least likely would be New Belgium Brewing Company.
You jinxed them.
And about a week later, when we left for the tour, was when the announcement came out that they had, done their merger. And that was what everybody on the tour wanted to talk about. Every stop we made, people were talking about New Belgium. And it was just a really unique, interesting. I got a lot of insights into the industry I've never have gotten without being there on the ground, and just really fun.
Well, Dow, you have a long and varied history on both the professional side and the home brewing side as well. And I guess you before we went on the air, you sent me a photograph of your being instrumental in the state of Georgia as far as getting home brewing legalized.
Yeah, it was really funny because Georgia was the second to last, I think, state to have legalized home brewing. And that would be at least a little funny considering the former governor, Jimmy Carter, in 1978 signed the national law that made home brewing legal, but states could override that. And I think that was, a few years when Georgia's home brewing was a few years before you started brewing, correct?
Well, I started brewing back in '96, probably,
and that was 1993.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, my first, I actually started home brewing. I grew up in Atlanta, but I spent 2 years in Canada, and in the mid '80s, and I could basically walk to the local homebrew shop from there, and that's where I first started home brewing, was up in Canada. And then after that, in 1989, I was the first craft brewer in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
So I've got a history. I've got a few medals from the Great American Beer Festival. But one of the things that I discovered early on, and I had actually left the craft brewing industry for about 10 years, is the craft brewing industry has just wonderful people. Some people hear of the 80-20 rule. Like if a teacher has problems, 80% of her problems come from 20% of their students. And I always look at the craft brewing industry that 80% of the people in it are phenomenal people. Mm-hmm. And then the other 20% you don't really care about.
And they get most of the attention, it seems.
Yeah, but it's just so nice when I can walk into a brewery and I have a, especially in Ohio, and showing how wonderful the craft brewing industry is here, is I have a special needs child who goes along with me, and he actually presents medals for me at the U.S. Open. And everybody loves him. Matter of fact, I think they rather see him than me when I walk into a brewery, because they always have like a Diet Coke waiting up on the counters, waiting for him, knowing that I'm going to be visiting. And if he doesn't come, they always ask where he is. Wow. And so that's just it just warms my heart every time, that Cam is welcome. And whether he just turned 21, so now he can legally be there. So,
so Dow, you skipped right over being a craft beer pioneer in Georgia. Let's back up and talk about that.
Well, that was really interesting because in the state of Georgia, there was Budweiser, there was Miller, and there was me. And the state really had no clue what to do with me. And it took almost a year to get all our licensing done there. I used to be the whipping boy of the ATF. My dad explained it to me as they needed to justify their jobs and they didn't want to go after the big guys. So they would put me in a room and there'd be 6 of the ATF officials, and they would drill me on all the things that I didn't do, wanting me to confess, of some illegal thing that I had done. And so that was not the fun part. We also were on a strict 3-tiered system. Once again, Georgia was one of the last states to, be able to homebrew, but it was also one of the last states to be able to allow brewers to serve on site. And so there was like a restaurant next to us, and our beer had to travel 90. We were in a town called Helen, Georgia. Our beers were called Hellenbach. And the beers would have to travel down all the way down to Atlanta, which was about 90 miles away, in order to come back to the restaurant that was 100 yards away. But one of the greatest instances that we had was Michael Jackson was doing one of his United States and Canada tours to update his next book. And of course, we were the only ones in Georgia. So he flew down to Atlanta, and it was a 90-minute drive. And I'd met Michael a couple times briefly, but it's funny. So you have this guy who, is your idol, who is the beer god of beer gods. And when you get to sit with him on a 90-minute drive, you get to learn about the person, where he is probably the most easygoing bat guy. He's from a very poor family. He lives in a very small apartment with all his books. And one of the things that he hated the most was when he would go to breweries, they would take him to these 5-star restaurants to impress him. And he wanted to go to local. He wanted to experience the local feel, not, the big 5-star places. And we were in a kind of like a German Alpine town up in Georgia. And we had this big bratwurst and German dinner, and we realized that's exactly what he didn't want. And if any of your listeners are familiar with Waffle House,
I've heard of it.
That is where we took him for breakfast the next morning, and where the people who worked in the restaurant, especially the cooks and waitresses, I would say very few of them had a full set of teeth, but wonderful, warm people. I mean, just incredible. And they were so thrilled that Michael Jackson was there. Not that it was Michael Jackson or anything else, but it was the first time they've ever met a guy from England. And so there's a thing in Waffle House about, how to get hash browns is like smothered, covered, top, chunked, and all this thing. And he is, what things are important to him is when he had his little notebook and he was just busy writing down all the terms that he had never heard before. And so we found out that was like one of his best experiences. Then where most people, if you go to impress somebody, that would not necessarily be your number one restaurant of choice.
I treated myself this week to a case of delicious meads from our friends and sponsors Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies in Vermont. I kept talking about the seasonal Wild Hunt, so I had to get 2 4-packs of that. I also got 4 packs of Valkyrie's Choice, Old Wayfarer, Hop Swarm, and Root of All Evil, which has ginger in it. Susan and I shared a can of Wild Hunt night before last for supper, and it is delicious. It's a blend of honey, cranberry, blood orange, and spice. It's nicely tart and smells of spice and honey, and I think it's going to make a great companion to turkey and dressing, if I can keep my hands off of it until the holiday times. I looked on Groenfell.com, and there's still some left as of the time of writing the script, but it's a limited edition seasonal, so you better get yours now. There's free shipping for orders of more than $75 across the country, even here in Arkansas, where I live. The mead came very well packed, and very well handled, and it went straight into the beer fridge. I can't wait to sample the rest of my Groenfell order and share it with friends and family. Check them out and get some for yourself at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's GROENNFELL. So talk about the U.S. Open. How did it start and when? And just give us the background.
Well, it all started. The first competition was 2009, and actually, I'd been out of the beer business for about 10 years. And actually, I had done some websites, and one website was making some money, and that was good. And I go, you know what the beer industry needs? And at the time, the Brewers Association's website is nothing like it is today. But before then, it was didn't quite, I'd say, was big on help promoting the breweries and stuff like that. And so I bought an old website, and it was funny because I did a search on my beer name Hellenbach, and I said if any website has it in there, then that may be one to buy because it's old. And so I bought a site called Beer Info, and we had some nice traffic to it, and it had basically the same traffic as the other website that was making money, but it made about zero. And because brewers didn't advertise, and we were promoting, going through there. And I went to my first craft brewers conference in 20 years in Boston in 2008. And I made a beeline for the Beer Advocate guys. And at the time, if you looked at Beer Advocate, it didn't have any advertising to it. And I asked the guys, I said, would you mind me asking, I know this is a lot of work, how you are making your money? And they said, oh, we do beer festivals. And I went, oh, well, I don't know if I can do that. I said, but I probably could do a beer judging. And it was like a great idea to get all my old beer guys together, all the ones that, were working with me in the brewers in Georgia, and the folks. It was like the board of directors of the brewing company, everybody jumped on board the U.S. Open at the same time. And we had not brewed a beer in 10 years. And the funny thing is, when I was discussing this with my wife, and she, kindly reminded me on how much money I lost, with the brewery. She goes, "This cannot lose money." And I said, okay. And so I talked to some people in the beer industry, and one guy came up and he said, "Hey, Dad, this is 2009. There's a recession going. You need to just let everybody have their beer entries for free." And I go, well, that would mean I would lose money. And so we came out with this thing where all breweries could enter 2 free entries, and then the other one had a $50 fee. Well, it ended up the first year we got 50 breweries to enter. Most of them just did the free entries. Our total expenses for the contest our expenses were medals, a ticket for our old brewmaster to come down from Canada, and pizza. And the total cost was $2,250.
Oh, well.
And total entries, paid entries, was $2,300. We banked $50. We got to do it again. And since then, except for last year, the U.S. Open has grown 20 to 50% each year.
Oh, my.
And so that's why. And then for the last 3 years, just because the World Beer Cup has not been involved, for the last 3 years, we are the second largest beer judging competition in the United States.
So what does the U.S. Open bring to the party that, say, the Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup don't? I mean, how do you differentiate yourself and attract people to enter your competition?
Well, one thing, it was just like, we still have Beer Info. We still work with brewers. We still, do their, when they've got press releases and I average about going to about 200 breweries a year, so we have social media for there. But one thing that differentiates us from all the major competitions, which would be, James, basically to your heart, is we allow home brewers. And we only allow, it's like the U.S. Open in golf or tennis. You have to get qualifiers. And it's really great that, even some people go, are you in competition with the GABF? And the answer is no, we just kind of do what we do. But the like the American Homebrewers Association, all their gold medal winners are invited to enter the U.S. Open, and those are the only ones that get to, the homebrewers that get to enter. And the American Homebrewers Association actually sends out our invitation to their winners. So we work together with them.
Wow. But one thing that differentiates you from the others is I don't think that that the others have a year's top 10 list of favorite beer names. Do they? I looked on your website. And
well, that's for fun. I tell you one thing else that we differentiate ourselves. One thing that differentiates us with any other competition is the amount of entries that we do. When you get the category, which we have, like the experimental and anything goes category, we get to see trends, and sometimes we will start categories on the spot. If we get 20 different categories, 20 different beers in a new category, we will actually create a category on the spot.
Wow.
And with the New England category, we were the first ones to start the New England IPAs. A lot of styles. I think we were the first to do Baltic Porters. I remember when Wayne Wabels from Cigar City gave me a call and said, "Yeah, would you consider doing adding a Baltic Porter category?" And I had to be honest with him, and I said, "Wayne, what is a Baltic Porter?" And I'd never seen one made before, or never had one. And so he explained to me, and I said, "Okay, I'll quickly put it on the list. If we get 10 entries, and then we'll run it. If we don't get 10 entries, we won't." And he goes, "That's fair enough." And so we did, and I think we got somewhere between 12 and 15 entries, and so that's only became a new category.
Wow.
We will have categories that are another example of a category of one of my favorites is like Imperial Stouts. And then you have people doing extreme Imperial Stouts, that are, 13, 14, 15, 20% alcohol, which there is no way, no matter how good that tastes and how much wonderful that beer is, you can't classify it into a regular Imperial Stout category.
Right.
And so we have broken those ones off. We do specialty because, and I'll just reiterate on the Imperial Stout categories, because, people are putting so many different ingredients in it. And so, you have your basic, style line guideline. And, in a lot of our categories, it's all judge's preference. On the non-traditional, like the extreme specialty categories, we have 12 IPA categories, which I think is more than anybody else. And in my day, back in 1989, and the first time that I entered the Great American Beer Festival, that was the first time that the Brewers Association recognized IPA as a judgeable category.
Wow.
Brewed IPA was equally unpopular back then, though.
So I got to go through this top 10 list. I feel like I'm David Letterman. This year's top 10 favorite beer names taken from the U.S. Open website. Number 10, Bitchin' Kitchen IPA from MPH Brewing. Number 9, That's Wit She Said from Legacy Ale Works, and I wish I'd come up with that one. Number 8, the Kashmir Shrinkage Pale Ale from 1840 Brewing. Number 7, the Dank Poet Society Imperial IPA from RIIP Beer Company. Number 6, Magic Carpet Ride, RYE''D, from Model A Brewing. It's another one I probably could have come up with. Number 5, Never Fight a Man with a Perm, barley wine, from Linwood Brewing Concern. Number 4, Triple Dollar Bill Y'all, or maybe it's Triple Dollar Bill Y'all, depending on who you talk to, from Lexington Brewing and Distillery. Number 3, we're going to need a bigger pontoon boat, double IPA from Pontoon Brewing. Number 2, I Hated Listerman Before It Was Cool Stout from Listerman Brewing. And number 1, the number 1 top 10 favorite beer name from the U.S. Open, Finely Aged Plumber's Crack Ale from Bad Dad Brewing Company.
Love it.
So you got to have it's good that you've got a good sense of humor along with that as well, because it's all a part of it.
Well, I'll say that there's one other interesting thing about what differentiates us from other competitions is we don't have scoring sheets.
What?
No, we don't. We actually have 4 guys, and they've got to decide upon themselves which beers go on to the next round, or which ones are what they medal. And what this now becomes what I think we have successfully done. It becomes a community of judges. You have to get along, and so it's. I think that's one of the greatest things that we have created is where people, besides the beer that brings people together, it's now bringing each other together. And I mean, when you start a competition and you start having people flying all over from the United States and spending their own money, and it's like the JBF gives you a per diem. We don't give per diems. And people fly over and come to our judgings just for 2 reasons: for the beer and the camaraderie of the other judges.
There's kind of I could see a double-edged or two sides of the argument on that. Number the AHA and the Brewers Association, they give feedback is one of the reasons that they encourage people to enter the competitions, because when you look at a score sheet and you have, some notes on there about your beer, you can use that to kind of improve your brewing process. Is that missed by people who enter the competition?
I would say we have you take 1,000 breweries, we'll have 3 people ask about scoring sheets. And I give them kind of the standard reason is, I was, especially when we started, it is basically come from 2 reasons why we do this. And one was because of necessity, and the other one comes from history. The history part is I participated in 8 Great American Beer Festivals. And I got judging sheets back, and they were crap. It was like, just why? And so we actually do the college beer championships, where schools that have fermentation programs enter, and we judge them, and they get they get scoring sheets back, because they're beginning brewers. And we realize how important that is. With us, we probably use half as many judges, and we have grown faster than anybody else or whatever. And so it was becoming too much, trying to get all the scoring things and everything done. After 5 or 6 years, when we realized we never gave them out before, it was then when we decided not to do it, it became a better community between the judges during the event. And so that is our policy. Is it a negative? Yes, for some brewers. But I tell you what, if you want to, pay $250 or I forgot what the charge is, somewhere between $150 and $250 per entry, and get judges' feedback, from them, great, just do it. And I said, we charge 75. We're one of the most economical judges. And matter of fact, I've had more brewers come to me and say, Dow, you're undercharging for your entry fees. So, yeah, it's your double-edged sword as well. Then you've got to also go with, the cost. And then if you're going like with small breweries, or put it this way, in last year during COVID year, I don't see the JABF or any other competition giving free entries to help them along. And I don't see anybody else. That's another reason why we did one this year. Every brewery got one free one. So we work hard with the breweries. We realize that these are tough times. If you don't give judging sheets back, well, okay. But also, we got your backside.
Let's switch over to some advice giving. And Michael, you've been coasting along here. You haven't done much work in this interview, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I'm a professor by trade, so I know that I talk too much. So I've judged both BJCP type events where you are really paying attention to the score sheet, those kinds of things, and of course this event. And I think I'll just draw on my day job too. A lot of times people, new scholars, new researchers, people that do kind of egg-headed ivory tower kind of research like I do, I say, well, what's some good advice for how to be a good researcher? And I say, well, you should ask a good researcher, not me. But what advice that I've taken from others is, say, well, are you, in the academic world, there's a peer review process. Most people have heard of that, right? And one of the very first things that I've heard very experienced researchers say is, hey, are you reviewing, right? Are you judging? Are you evaluating other people's work? That's going to be a big advantage in terms of your learning, in terms of your understanding. And I've really found that to be true as a home brewer, to hear other people's feedback about professional beers that I know are being made by people more experienced than me. So I would just encourage everybody out there, if you're a home brewer, find a way to get into some judging. I'm sure people running those competitions where, the ones near you, would be really happy to have you. Mm-hmm. They always need more judges, right? And it's such a great learning opportunity. And I really think it's really helped me grow as a brewer. But the other thing I've really learned doing these judging things is I think it's whatever you're judging, it's this, you have to consider that the judges are trying to eliminate beers, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to narrow things down. So I think the first thing that'll happen is, if I'm judging New England IPAs and I don't smell anything coming out of the cup, you're probably not going to make it, right? So I think those style guidelines, although they seem very draconian sometimes, I don't know if Gordon Strong will probably never want to meet me now, but they feel that way sometimes. But as a judge, you're thinking, how do I evaluate these things, right? Whether you're deep in the score sheet or you're just trying to make a judgment. So I think understanding what style you're trying to hit and, how to communicate that to the judges in an effective way is an important thing. The other thing that I notice is it's hard to, when you're judging a lot, it's hard to pick up on subtlety. Right. So I think it's not a surprise that beers that have strong flavors, strong aroma, that are bold beers tend to do well. I hope, as for myself and other people who judge, I hope that's a caution that we take there. But I think, to try to do something that shows off what you're trying to do, whether that's strong flavors or if it's just to make it really clear what you're trying to do with your beer. That's something that I notice a lot.
When you're talking about judging, though, it's funny. You're going to, once again, you asked me, what differentiates us from other ones, and I said the number of styles. because when you're a home brewer and you're doing home competitions, you have to always look at the style guide. It's not. I always remember the first time when Bourbon County Stout entered the GABF. Is every judge that tasted it said it was by far the most interesting, the best beer in the competition, and there was no category for it. So thus it didn't medal. And so where we have in the U.S. Open, where we have so many categories to allow the professional brewer to play, and it was just like you have a specialty pale ale, which then you get to do all sorts of wonderful things. But the funny thing is, if you're judging in the Great American Beer Fest or the World Beer Cup, or more importantly, the AHA homebrew competitions, is sometimes you cannot experiment, with doing, higher IPUs or adding different ingredients, adding herb spices to an IPA. That'll completely disqualify it from, like a West Coast IPA.
Mm-hmm.
So, my suggestion, or whatever, is to home brewers is, there's sometimes you go to the point where there's beers that you love to brew that'll never win competitions and are some of the greatest beers around.
Mm.
And then, but if you want to win competitions, is narrowing your focus on those styles.
I'd say the beers that I've had, I had a long discussion with a good friend of ours, who was also judging at the U.S. Open, about a beer that I really didn't like. I'll just throw this out there. People can hate on me if they want. I don't like Sabro hops. I really don't like them. I love New England IPA. I love hops, right? But that's just not. It's the dill. I pick up a dill flavor from it that I just don't like. And sure enough, one of these beers, it's blind, so I didn't know, right? But I immediately picked it out because I don't like it. But that beer, I ended up advocating that we move it on, to a final round, because I think it was a New England IPA. And I thought, this is, first of all, this absolutely meets the style. It had great aroma. It was not oxidized. The color was great. It had a lot of flavor, not a lot of bitterness, had the great mouthfeel, ticked all the boxes. I just didn't like it. But that's okay. Right. And to me, I thought, this brewer, whoever brewed this, had something in mind. Right. And that they're communicating that to me. I picked that up. Right. It's not what I wanted it to have, but it wasn't muddled. It wasn't one of these beers you're talking about, James, where I couldn't figure out what they were trying to do. It was clear. And I really appreciated that.
And did the feedback from your fellow judges sway you in that direction? Did that kind of open your mind as to the possibilities that this beer might have?
Yeah, I don't remember if in that particular instance, but certainly that has happened through these judging experiences. And I think that's a great thing about this, whatever kind of judging format, when the judges are, trying not to be biased, especially those kind of conversations where you are talking to each other with the purpose of trying to make a better evaluation, right? Not trying to groupthink, right? But to say, hey, okay, give this beer another shot. Think about what is the brewer trying to do here? What's the style? Why is it that, that you're giving it a lower score, right? Is that right? So that, I think that's extremely helpful. And again, selfishly, I learn a lot. So it's great.
The folks at Imperial Organic Yeast love what they do, and they're making it a priority to ensure that all brewers, home brewers and professionals alike, have access to great yeast and friendly and knowledgeable service. And there's big news for sour fans. W25 Lacto Brevis is now in homebrew pouches. I've got mine and plan to do a passion fruit sour with it. Lacto Brevis, they say, is extremely hop sensitive, so it's great for kettle souring, for example, with an unhopped wort, which is what I plan to do. Lacto brevis will typically drop the wort pH to 3.3 in 1 to 4 days, depending on the temperature and inoculation rate. You know we love Imperial Organic Yeast. Say it with me. With a pitch rate of 200 billion cells and easy-to-open packages, my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches with a fresh pouch of Imperial. And the shelf life of 4 months, so you can't go wrong. And my beers are usually bubbling before bedtime. Ask your local homebrew store about W25 Lacto Brevis and check out Imperial at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. There's a practical tip, or there's a practical challenge that I don't know if there's a magic solution for or not, or some good advice. It may differ from person to person, but a lot of what I hear about competition judged beers is, like, for instance, a category like IPAs or, strongly flavored beers is, gee, I hope that my beer is, among the first in that flight to be tasted, because of palate fatigue. How real is that, and what are the ways that judges can use to kind of combat that?
Lots of crackers.
But I tell you one thing with our judges don't quite get as much palate fatigue as others. And the sole reason is just like when you get an oxidized beer and somebody drinks it, in which everybody knows it's going to be out. We're not filling out that form of, what's wrong with this beer. Everybody's got to fill out with this. Is the first person who takes a sip and then tastes a really off characteristic. So, we have a saying called the Carla. It used to be called Dumper. But that it basically said the judges shouldn't even try it because it's going to kill their palate. And so the judges will judge less beers that way. It was funny. I was talking to one brewer not too long ago, and they said, all my beers got all they got was oxidized. And I talked to other brewers, and that's all they got on their menu. And it was kind of insulting, or not insulting, but it was just like they were looking for our help. But if you're judging, beers, and you get, it was kind of funny. I was hearing them sour on some of the other beer competitions, and just by the judges' guides or the judges' notes. But with us, they know it's a medal award-winning competition. And the fellow judges look out for each other. And so when beers come in and they're contaminated or whatever the thing is, all we know is when a judge drinks something and, you're talking, let's say 100 different entries, and you immediately know that's not a top 10 entry. Which is pretty easy usually. So, then our judges don't get quite as much palate fatigue.
Huh, that's interesting.
So people make mistakes, of course. You're not going to agree with every judge. Somebody could taste, what turns out to be, one of the most decorated beers ever. And certainly some judge along the way said, oh, I think this is flawed. Right. And for lots of reasons. But I think the interesting thing is that you just have to, I think that's why we do lots of competitions, right? That's why we taste lots of beers. That's why, brewers are looking for, I tour all these breweries every year, talk to a lot of brewers, and they're always looking for more feedback, right? Great brewers are always looking for more feedback, whether that's from judges or from any of their customers or just anybody. And I think you could, we don't do anybody any favors. Those brewers don't want us to come in and smile and say, choke down one of their beers and say, it's great, right? Your local brewer wants to hear from you. If you're a beer nerd, like all of us are, that's valuable feedback you could give to your local brewer. So,
and you can be nice about it.
Sure, of course, of course,
and
of
and
course.
and don't do what some people do, is go into a bar and then tweet something bad about a beer while they're in the tasting room.
Right. That's just bad form, of course, right? But
You need to tell your server or the brewer and not the world that you're having a bad beer at this
sure.
place.
Yeah, but who among us has not gone to a tap room and been asked about a beer we're tasting that we just we don't really care for, and we smile and say, "It's wonder," yeah, great, right? Or to your friend at a homebrew club, right? Uh, if you're at that point in your homebrewing career where your friends are just telling you how great your beer is, it's really hard to get better, right?
Yeah, for sure. So how do people get involved with the U.S. Open? I mean, give us the sales pitch. I mean, how do people get involved both on the entry side and the judging side?
Well, the judging side, we believe it or not, we're very picky. We always want to make sure people get along and have a good beer knowledge. It used to be when it was easier to like everybody would like to be a judge in a big competition, and the earlier years I was concentrating on quality of people and quality of judges. And somebody goes, how do I become a beer judge? And I said, well, know me for 20 years. And I have I know I had known people in the brewing industry for 20 years, so we had enough and didn't have to worry about it. The or the same thing is if somebody was interested in stuff, and I said, well, if you're interested, figure out some time to come to Oxford or come to Cincinnati, and wherever you are in Cincinnati, pick out a brewery or a beer pub, and I'll come down and have a beer with you. That's how important the camaraderie is to me, and part of the U.S. Open is making sure the people get along.
Mm.
And as in the entry part is, basically, if you're a home brewer, is you will get your invitation by the AHA when you win your gold medal. Small breweries can always go to usopenbeer.com and enter. Next year we are really looking forward to next year, because not only do we've done the U.S. Beer Open Championship. This was our 13th year. And the funny thing is, we've now done several other competitions based upon what the breweries are doing. 7 years ago, we started the U.S. Open Cider Competition because so many breweries at the time were doing ciders. And so we are now the second largest cider competition in the United States. And then we also did the USO starting 6 years ago. We started the U.S. Open College Beer Championship for all the schools that have fermentation programs. We then followed that by 2 years ago, we started two different competitions. The U.S. Open Whiskey and Spirits competitions, where we did that because so many breweries started doing spirits.
Wow.
And then we, 2 years ago, we started the U.S. Open Hard Seltzer competition.
I was going to ask.
We just did that last weekend. It was a long. That was a long haul as a judge.
There are some.
That was a long haul.
But there are some good ones out there, though.
There were. It was a great opportunity for me to taste a lot of them. Right. So, not something I drink a lot.
So, So as getting involved, it's basically as a brewery, cidery, distillery. It's U.S. Open whiskey, cider, hard seltzer.com. And or it's this U.S. Open college beer or college. So, but it's funny as we expanded it. It started at in my parents' house. the U.S. Open Beer Championship. And today, which also makes us unique too, we now have our own venue. We have a 6,000 square foot pole barn, Amish pole barn, where when people are saying, when beers get delivered, well, UPS and FedEx now can back up directly into the barn, and the beers go directly into the cooler.
Oh, wow.
And then when we judge, the judging is on the other side of the cooler. That helps keep the beers fresh. And it was funny. The reasoning for this, it was funny. A year or so ago, we were realizing, okay, I'm over 60, and so are a lot of the other people. And I asked them, how much longer do you want to do this? And all of them said, well, at least 10 years, but we got to figure out an easier way because we're getting old.
I can identify.
And so now I bought a 5-acre small farm, and with the 6,000 square foot barn in it, which has all the room for the judging area for cooling. And that is another thing that distinguishes us from the other competitions is and the other thing that distinguishes us is we were the only beer competition that was started by former and current brewers.
This has been a blast. And Michael, I appreciate your writing in and suggesting the show. And Dow, I appreciate your work in continuing to improve the quality of beer in the country.
It's just shameless fan adoration, James. That's what happens. But tell Steve that I still hope to meet him someday too. I'm a big fan.
Well, Sir James, about the last things I like to say is about with my job is I actually, no matter how hard I work at this job, I get absolutely no sympathy of how much work it takes to put on a beer championship. Say you get 8,000 beers shipped to your house. But the UPS, some of the best friends that I have made are the UPS and FedEx drivers.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it, guys.
Same here, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir James.
Well, thanks again to Michael and Dow. We talked for a good long time after we got done recording, and it's always fun to get together with good beer folks. And I'm glad Michael reached out to me to be on the show. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, or send in your disaster story, don't forget that. Write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our bumble-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well, stay away from skunks, and stay tuned. So long.